the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents, it doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask, what made them do this? They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society.
So who did y'all create? And what are you talking about? Created what? The predators that's on the street that you bashing now? You son of a bitch.
To protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society. And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth. I'm the guy that said, rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it and notice it. And even when we notice it and we know it occurs, we don't know why. So you cannot make rehabilitation a condition for release. That's why in our system, there's the federal system, you serve 85% of your time. It's a shame, but we don't know how to rehabilitate. But there is a consensus, and I will cease. A, we must make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malefactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. I don't care why they become a sociopath. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change the behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail, away from my mother, your husband, our families. But we would be absolutely stupid as a society if we didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks still exist. And we must deal with that.
Everybody asks, what kind of Democrat? I'm an Obama-Biden Democrat, man.
After 8 years alongside President Obama, Joe Biden is coming back as a solo act.
I'm ready to go.
With his long record facing a new look under the spotlight of the 2020 campaign.
Gentlemen and ladies of the Senate.
One chapter receiving fresh scrutiny comes from his earliest years in the Senate, when he strongly opposed mandatory school busing. It was designed to achieve integration and a more equitable education. It was the mid-1970s. Biden favored desegregation, but not through busing. What's less known is how he followed the lead of some of the Senate's most fervent segregationists. In a series of never-before-published letters reviewed by CNN, the strength of Biden's opposition to busing comes into sharper focus. On March 25, 1977, Biden wrote, "My bill strikes at the heart of the injustice of court-ordered busing. It prohibits the federal courts from disrupting our educational system." Biden sought and received support from Mississippi Senator James Eastland, the Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and a leading symbol of Southern resistance to desegregation. He frequently spoke of blacks as, quote, an inferior race. Biden...
That motherfucker there was a straight KKK wizard.
reflected on that era earlier this year.
There are a bunch of racists. There was, James O. Easton, Mississippi, Strom Thurmond, and so on. There were 9 guys who were in the...
But they was your mans in them, though. Now all of a sudden they racist. Come on, man. Joe Biden, you a racist son of a bitch.
caucus that I ran against in the civil rights movement.
But he did not say that Eastland and others were partners on several of Biden's anti-busing bills. On June 30th, 1977, Biden wrote, "Dear Mr. Chairman, I want you to know that I very much appreciate your help during this week's committee meeting in attempting to bring my anti-busing legislation to a vote." Then in 1978, Biden again asked Eastland to put his anti-busing bill before the full Senate, writing, "Your participation in floor debate would be welcomed." 4 decades later, after building a strong civil rights...
That coon-ass nigga Al Sharpton, y'all. Sucking on his Frank. You know what I'm saying? With some of these coon-ass niggas. So we gotta watch these niggas, y'all. We gotta watch these niggas. These old house niggas.
rights record, Biden stands by his opposition to busing, arguing it did not address institutional racism. Most busing programs in America were later abandoned, after bringing more hardship than equal opportunity to all students. A Biden spokesman telling CNN, "Joe Biden is today, and has been for more than 40 years in public life, one of the strongest and most powerful voices for civil rights in America." Ronnie Dunn is a professor at Cleveland State University who co-wrote the book Boycotts, Busing, and Beyond. He says Biden's opposition to busing is not disqualifying, but warrants explanation.
Those letters I find somewhat surprising given Senator Biden's or Vice President Biden's current position and potential candidacy for the presidency and his position as a liberal. Those are issues that he's obviously going to have to answer for.
You said surprising. Surprising in what way?
Well, the fact that he would solicit the support of staunch segregationists, James Eastland as well as Jesse Helms, introducing legislation as opposing busing at that time.
So the question facing Biden is how he reconciles nearly a half century in public life with today's Democratic Party. Of course, Jake, one of his biggest pieces of experience is that experience and long record. That also is one of his biggest challenges.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes. When I was 17 years old, like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
When I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And
see in the background all them coons, y'all. Go out there and go after them coons. And them coons out there caping for him, y'all. Defending this racist ass son of a bitch.
And, I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on Sundays to go out and desegregate movie theaters and things like that, we do it through the black church. I was no big shakes, Reverend, in the civil rights movement. I was just a kid. I got involved in desegregated movie theaters and helping, you may remember Reverend Moyer in Delaware and Herman Holloway organized voter registration drives, coming out of black churches on Sundays, figuring how we were going to move. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award. A thing when I sat in black churches on the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of it.
I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Despite insisting that she wasn't calling Biden racist, Harris was in fact accusing him of preventing black students from integrating into white schools, and of being friends with openly racist politicians. So, what is Joe Biden's real record on race? Harris wasn't inaccurate in her criticism of Biden, who has a checkered history on racial justice, despite painting himself as a staunch civil rights advocate over the years. Perhaps one of the most criticized moments in Biden's past is his involvement in the creation of the notorious 1994 crime bill. People forget that the informal name for the bill was Biden's crime law. The legislation is widely criticized for being responsible for making the effects of mass incarceration in the U.S. exponentially worse. Biden was also a key architect of the devastating Iraq War. Responsibility for the war is often blamed on George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and other Republicans. But in reality, Biden played a key role as a Democrat. In the lead-up to the war, Biden convened a series of Senate hearings to drum up support for the invasion on the basis of flimsy intelligence material being presented by the Republicans.
What is the threat from Iraq? Obviously, to fully answer this question will require us to have additional enclosed hearings.
Not a single anti-war voice was invited to the hearings. Biden also admits to having been civil with Democratic colleagues who were openly racist, like James Eastland, who had a long history of racist remarks, including that black Americans belonged to an inferior race, as well as the segregationist Herman Talmadge, who vigorously opposed school integration.
Governor, this means, in effect, that your state would set up a private school system. We intend to maintain separate schools in Georgia, one way or another, come what may.
Biden also developed a decades-long friendship with segregationist Strom Thurmond, who he worked with attempting to pass the Biden-Thurmond Violent Crime Control Act in 1991. Biden also spoke at his funeral.
We became good friends. I'm not sure exactly why or how it happened, Nancy, but we did.
In the lead-up to the 2008 election, Biden was also in the spotlight for a number of comments, including referring to Barack Obama as articulate and clean, and associating Indian immigrants with Dunkin' Donuts and 7-Eleven chains.
Do these gaffes or misunderstandings, or however you would characterize them, indicate you're uncomfortable talking about race, or are people just being too sensitive?
I think that I have my whole career. I got involved in public policy. I got involved in politics because of the civil rights movement.
Biden also has an unreliable history surrounding his own involvement in the civil rights struggle. He has at times claimed to have been deeply involved, at other times not that active, and in the lead-up to the 2020 election once again claimed to have been heavily involved. He was also caught out claiming to have been arrested trying to visit Nelson Mandela.
This day, 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
You now say you weren't arrested and it didn't happen in Soweto. You were at the airport in Johannesburg and you were stopped from going through the door for blacks. I guess the question is, were you confused Or were you just trying to embellish a story?
Offered the chance to run with Biden in 2020, Kamala Harris's once scathing criticisms about race faded away, and the two have worked closely since winning the election.
I believe you that you're fully supportive of him. How does that transition happen? How do you go from being such a passionate opponent on such bedrock principles for you, and now you guys seem to be pals?
It was a debate.
Not everybody landed punches like you did, though.
It was a debate.
So you don't mean it?
It was a debate. That the whole reason, literally, it was a debate. It was called a debate.
I understand.
Everyone traveled to the debate. There were journalists there covering the debate, where there would be a debate of differences of opinion and issues. I am 1,000% supportive of Joe Biden, and I will again do everything I can to make sure he is elected.
The Democrats may be keen to forget Biden's past, but should everyone else have to as well?
Joe Biden has said women are to be believed. They should start with the presumption that they're telling the truth. Do you feel as though you've been given that presumption?
No, I think that's a hypocritical statement because that's not been my experience. And he has said that in public. But then what's been happening is with social media and in the media, I've been pretty attacked and smeared. And some of his campaign supporters and surrogates have been the ones doing the attacks.
Kamala Harris is now Joe Biden's running mate after saying that she believed some of Joe Biden's accusers.
Right.
How does that sit with you?
You know, what I am really questioning is on the Democratic, when I was trying to come forward with my full history with Joe Biden, there were many really qualified Democrats running for president, including Kamala Harris. Why isn't she president and the presidential candidate? Why does she have to be VP? And what does that say about our culture that we have to go sideways into getting a woman president, right?
But do you think there is an element of hypocrisy for her to have said that and to now be his running mate?
Yeah, I think there's hypocrisy all around. I think it's a nonpartisan issue, along with sexual assault and sexual, harassment. And what I think, though, is one of the things that struck me was recently she said, I know a predator when I see one. And that upset me a great deal, watching that, because it's, again, like being erased.
What do you say to people who say they don't believe you?
That's okay. You don't have to believe me. I'm the one who has to live with it. So, ultimately, and some people feel like they have to smear me to vote for Biden, Americans anyway, and they don't have to. Like, I have a friend who's going to vote for Biden. She knows what happened to me, but she's not so much voting for him as simply not voting for Trump. So there's a lot of fear right now in our electoral. So it's not so much about loving Biden as about fearing the current presidency, and it's a very difficult place to be. I mean, it was excruciating for me to come forward, as you know.
It seems there was very little for you to gain in coming forward.
There's nothing to gain. And in my case, I lost everything. But what I want to do is make a path forward for other survivors so that they can come forward and not lose everything in the process of discussing their history.
Incredibly accused of sexual misconduct, and not just by his own daughter, whom he showered with. In the presidential election of 2020, Tara Reid, a woman called Tara Reid, emerged to say that while working for Joe Biden in the U.S. Senate, he sexually assaulted her in a violent way. Most of the media buried the story. And we'll be honest and admit that we didn't know what to think of it. But we finally sat down and talked at great length with Tara Reid to hear what happened. And we were completely convinced that this is real and that she was able to prove it.
Acting weird towards me. He would put his hands on my shoulder and put his fingers underneath my hair and do weird things like that. And then there was a scene where...
What did you think of that? I mean,
Well, bear in mind, and you were around and a professional in the 90s, it was a different... I don't know if you were in D.C., but it was a different vibe.
I was in D.C., yeah.
Okay, that was a different vibe, but it still was weird. I'd never had an employer do that, and Panetta certainly didn't act like that.
No, he's not like that.
No, not at all. And he's just all business. And, Joe Biden was always, he didn't seem like an intellectual giant, let's put it that way.
Right. No, he was famously not,
yeah,
but a charismatic and warm guy. That was the conventional view.
And and that's the thing. Behind closed doors, he was very temperamental.
Really?
And he would do this thing where he smiles when he's angry. It's very disconcerting. Very disconcerting. That big smile, and but he'd be angry, and he was very temperamental. He had me up against a wall, and he penetrated me with his fingers against my will. And it wasn't just the assault though. It was everything to do with, here I am, this young staffer, and he did this, and then I made him angry. And that's like someone you don't want to make angry. Because I said no.
I just think it's, I got to be honest, one of the reasons I didn't know what to make of your story was, I've been a man for, 53 years.
Yeah.
I've never heard of anything like that. Like that's, men are kind of piggish, as we know, and they do piggish things. But that's like kind of like rape. I mean, that's like so out of bounds that it's weird to think someone would do something like that.
It happened all at once. It happened really quickly. There was no flirtation with him or anything like that. It was very, he was usually with people, and he wasn't. I was at the wrong place, the wrong time, so to speak. And when it happened, he at first was like, "Come on, man, I heard you liked me." And I froze. And then he said he got angry, and that's when he smiled. That smile. And that's what was really jarring. And then he pointed his finger in my face, and he said, "You're nothing. You're nothing to me." And I froze. And then he said he got angry, and that's when he smiled. That smile. And that's what was really jarring. And then he pointed his finger in my face, and he said, "You're nothing. You're nothing to me." And then I must have had a certain look on my face, and he just took my shoulders and shook them. He said, "You're fine, you're fine, you're fine." And then he turned around and he walked away. And I remember it was just such a jarring, shocking incident. Probably was all of less than 5 minutes, right? But my vivid memory is sitting on these marble stairs, and my legs were shaking so badly because it wasn't just what he did. It's that I knew my career was over. That was it. I had said no, it was an awful thing, and this was the end. That was it. I had said no, it was an awful thing, and this was the end. He used his power and resources to silence me. And I'm going to share something with your audience. They took a cannonball to my life.
Yeah.
They went after my family. So that day, when he did that assault, he took my future. I didn't want to sleep with some senator. I wanted to be one. And that day, it ended.
Jim Crow was a law against black people. You weren't just talking about the era of Dwight Eisenhower and Harry Truman. You named Jim Crow. There's only one way you could deal with Jim Crow, and that's by race. I mean, look, you and I have mutual friends. People say you're a straight shooter. We may disagree on politics. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. But look, you were born in Brooklyn, you went down into the South, went to Florida State, you have an interracial marriage, you're the congressman of a district that's not a black district. I mean, how can you even live with yourself acting like Jim Crow was a good era or better era for blacks? What happened to you?
Okay, that's real cute. That's real cute. I did not say that, and I'm not going to sit here and have to insinuate that against me. Because right now you're lying about what I said. I did say Jim Crow. I did reference it 3 times. That's not to say that it was better. I never said that. Those words never came out of my mouth. When are you going to get that through your skull and everybody else's skull? I never said that. And the difference between me and a lot of other Republicans, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to sit here and be lied on. I'm not going to let you lie on
Jim Crow to bring families together.
Everybody is lying. Hakeem Jeffries was lying. The Biden campaign was lying. Go look at my words. Go look at my words.
People can
did I say Jim Crow was better? No, I did not. I did not say Jim Crow was better. I never said it was good. I did not have nostalgia. I never said any of those things. I was talking about black families and black family marriage rates during that time and the
All right, then what did Jim Crow do to contribute to black families?
I'm not talking. Oh my gosh!
You
what
said
I said
that you
you guys
said
said,
under
what I said
Jim
about
Crow,
Jim
black
Crow was,
families. So explain to me what Jim Crow did to help black families.
the marriage rates during the Jim Crow era were higher for black families
Because
up until
of
the
Jim
point
Crow?
of the Great Society. I did not say that. I said they were, and this is the problem. Because you're trying to say that I said because of Jim Crow marriages were at a higher rate. I did not say that. I said during. I said during.
But why
I guess
did
we
you
can't refer to
use Jim
time
Crow?
periods
Jim
then,
Crow
Reverend.
was
That
a
don't make
race
no
law.
sense.
I tried to tell you, Byron, there's no point whatsoever in debating or arguing with these clowns, okay? Because they're not interested in the truth. They are not honest actors, okay? One of the things that, again, is extremely frustrating to me, guys, during this whole fake outrage about Byron Donalds and his comments about Jim Crow is that clearly, listening to the video and reading his actual quote, he said nothing about Jim Crow being better for black people, but it has been spun in the mainstream liberal media because they're essentially an arm of the Democrat Party in order to attack Byron Donalds as a black Republican who sold out to Trump. Ultimately, this really is an attack on Trump, and this is part of the reason why I really do think that Byron Donalds should stop doing these interviews. But I understand where he's coming from. He knows that he's correct. He knows that they're lying. And he's doing the interviews in order to defend himself, okay? He wants to defend himself. He's standing up to these propagandists, and I actually commend him for that. I just don't think that there's a point to it anymore because the liberal media, they're going to continue to say that he said something that he didn't say, and only stupid people would believe the mainstream liberal media and their narrative at this point. So it is what it is, okay? But I'm so serious with the Democrats and this whole situation just proves that they really believe that black people are the dumbest people on the planet, right? Because you have to be a dummy to fall for this propaganda from the mainstream liberal media. And I think this is part of the reason why you're seeing black people move away from the Democrat Party, because it's getting to the point now where it's just offensive, right? These people are reality deniers, okay? They deny the reality of the economy, the reality of the border, the reality of crime, the reality that black families being together is actually a good thing, right? It doesn't matter what era we're in, okay? But that doesn't mean Jim Crow was a good thing. It just means that black families being together is a good thing, period. They just deny all these things, okay? And again, at some point, there is no point to engaging with these individuals because they're not really trying to have an honest conversation, right? But I'm not going to talk about that topic anymore. We beat that topic to death. I'm actually going to talk about a new topic here that Byron Donalds is discussing with Al Sharpton later on in this interview, which is about police reform and the fact that Trump did not support the George Floyd movement, right? And Al Sharpton is going to confront Byron Donalds on why Trump didn't want to get on board with the defund the police movement that Democrats were endorsing at the time. And Byron Donalds is going to humiliate Al Sharpton, who clearly does not know what he's talking about in this segment. So
Well, first of all, during the Trump presidency, he also signed into law reforms to criminal justice reform, the first step back, which actually helped get a lot of people released who were imprisoned under the 94 crime bill that was authored by Joe Biden. One of the worst pieces of crime legislation that's really impacted a lot of people in the black community.
You and I agree on the 94 crime bill. I marched on it, and Joe Biden has said that it went too far. But Donald...
Yeah, so again, why don't you ever hold Joe Biden accountable for the crime bill and the drug bill? Why don't you ever hold Joe Biden accountable for the so-called systemic racism that he's responsible for? Right? Every time these people talk about systemic racism or they name some policy, past policy, because again, a lot of this stuff is not even on the books anymore they're talking about. Okay, none of these people actually went through this stuff or suffered from any of this stuff that they're boo-hoo-on and cry about. But, for example, when they talk about redlining, when they talk about, again, the crime bill and stuff like that, all that is a result of Democrats, right? The redlining policy came under the New Deal. That was FDR. FDR is a god in the Democrat Party, right? That's who Joe Biden wants to be, okay? That's who Biden tried to model his presidency after, FDR. I mean, the Democrats have legislation called the Green New Deal. This is how much they look up to FDR. But FDR is the one that is responsible for redlining. One of the main things they bring up as a reason for why there's a significant wealth gap between blacks and whites. Redlining. They're always talking about redlining. Okay, well, again, why is it that you guys worship FDR? Who's responsible for that? Why is it that you guys are lining up and voting for Joe Biden, who's responsible for the drug bill, the crime bill, all of these disparities that you guys boo-hoo-on and cry about so much? You guys turn around and vote for the people and worship the people that are responsible for doing it.
I just told you it was the Tim Scott. I just told you the bill. It's the Tim Scott bill. And
when
you
Donald
keep asking
Trump
the same
went
question,
in front of that church and stood up there with the Bible, he did not tout any reform bill at all. End of story. And you and I both know that.
I'm sorry. So the only bills that matter, the only bills that matter are the ones that actually have a name that a president cites, not the actual legislation that's moving through Congress.
He could have named the bill. He was president of the
You already
United
know
States.
that's a ridiculous standard.
Well, then why didn't
that's a ridiculous standard.
If Tim Scott's was the bill, then why didn't the president come out and call on the Congress and the country to rally around that bill? He said nothing. You know it, and I know it.
First of all, I don't know. Donald Trump talks a lot. You should ask him that question.
Well,
I will tell you that Nancy Pelosi did not let that bill come up in the House. She was Speaker. Ask her.
All right, let me ask you this then.
Wow. Again, this is humiliating for Al Sharpton. To again, any educated person, just like when it comes to the Jim Crow conversation, I hope people can see through this, right? I really do. I hope people can see through this nonsense from these people. They really do think that the average person is dumb. They really believe black people are dumb because that is who these conversations are directed towards. It's directed towards black people. And they believe that you're so dumb that they can just flat out deny reality, just deny facts about the black family under Jim Crow, right? And how, marriage rates were higher, which is just a fact, okay? They come out here and now they're denying that the Republicans were pushing for a police reform bill and that Trump had supported it, even though, this is established fact that Republicans were pushing for it and Trump supported it. They just deny, it didn't happen.